Amina lived in a modest home perched at the edge of a small African village, a place where the dust of the road met the wildflowers of the surrounding fields. Her father, a kind but often distracted man, worked tirelessly to provide for the family, leaving Amina to navigate the household largely on her own. Despite the modesty of their dwelling, the home carried warmth, the smell of fresh bread from the hearth, the soft glow of lanterns in the evening, and the laughter of Amina as she moved gracefully through her chores. She was known throughout the village for her gentle nature, her clever mind, and her skill in storytelling, sewing, and tending small gardens. Neighbors admired her for her kindness, often sending their children to learn from her or to hear her weave tales that mixed wonder and wisdom into simple lessons. But the home also held shadows cast not by the absence of light but by the envy of her stepsister Lyra. Lyra was nearly the same age as Amina but possessed a heart filled with jealousy and restlessness. She could not bear the admiration that Amina received, not just from the villagers but from their own father who, though distracted, could not hide the pride in his daughter's talents. Every kind word spoken to Amina, every laugh that came naturally from her lips, every glance of admiration from neighbors, fanned the flames of Lyra's envy. It was quiet at first, a subtle remark meant to sting, a rolled eye when Amina performed some task effortlessly, but over time the cruelty grew. Lyra's mind became a constant machine of schemes, each day plotting some small indignity to chip away at her stepsister's spirit. Amina, for her part, sensed the tension but rarely let it cloud her kindness. She would retreat when Lyra's voice turned sharp or her eyes cold, slipping into corners of the house or into the garden outside where the sun warmed the soil and the air smelled of earth and flowers. Even when Lyra tripped her intentionally while carrying water or whispered cutting words when she mended clothes, Amina smiled, not out of submission but because she understood that harboring anger would weigh her down more than any cruelty. She often wondered what had caused Lyra's envy to grow so fierce, but she did not dwell on it. Instead, she focused on tending her own tasks, on caring for the small animals and plants in their care, and on dreaming of a life where kindness and creativity could flourish without fear. The contrast between the two sisters was stark. Where Amina exuded warmth and quiet confidence, Lyra radiated a restlessness that was as tangible as the shadows in the corners of the house. Lyra watched Amina with narrowed eyes, plotting new ways to undermine her confidence, imagining scenarios where her stepsister would stumble or fail, and feeling momentary satisfaction whenever she succeeded. Yet even in her malice, Lyra could not predict the resilience in Amina's spirit, a resilience born of patience, empathy, and the gentle encouragement that she found in small joys, whether it was the curl of smoke from the hearth or the soft brush of her fingers across the soil in her garden. The home, warm and modest as it was, became a stage for this quiet tension. Neighbors might see only a cheerful young girl moving through her chores, a father preoccupied but loving, and a stepsister who appeared simply impatient or temperamental. But within the walls, a subtle war of spirit and envy unfolded daily, each small act of kindness from Amina countered by a quiet act of cruelty from Lyra. And yet, through it all, Amina's light persisted, untouched by the bitterness that sought to shadow it, a beacon that would soon summon forces she could never have imagined. Lyra's envy deepened like a shadow stretching across the walls of their modest home, growing heavier with each passing day. Every time Amina's gentle hands wove a new basket, folded a crisp cloth, or prepared a fragrant meal, whispers of admiration traveled through the village, carried on the wind, and somehow reached Lyra's ears. The villagers' praise, often innocent and filled with genuine appreciation, grated against her heart like sand in a wound. Why her? Lyra would murmur when alone, staring at Amina bustling about the kitchen or guiding younger children through the steps of a story. Why does everyone admire her while I am ignored? Her jealousy began to take more deliberate forms. She started whispering lies to their father, insinuating that Amina was careless or prideful, or that she had secretly taken items that were not hers. Though he loved both daughters and trusted Amina's gentle nature, her father's distracted attention made him susceptible to Lyra's cunning words. The smallest suggestion of impropriety from Lyra planted seeds of doubt in his mind, and Amina noticed the slight changes in the way he looked at her. Hesitation where there had been certainty, cautiousness where there had been trust. Lyra also began isolating Amina in subtle ways. Invitations to friends were conveniently forgotten, chores piled up disproportionately, and tasks meant to tire her out were assigned with a calculating hand. The villagers began noticing Amina's absence at gatherings, at festivals, or at storytelling circles, yet they assumed she was occupied with household duties. Lyra's scheme worked quietly, insidiously. People began to see Amina as more fragile, more distant, and she became increasingly confined to the home under the guise of responsibility. Despite the tension, Amina maintained her composure. She felt the sting of her stepsister's cruelty, but her heart refused to harden. When Lyra's eyes glimmered with malice, she would retreat to quiet corners of the home, where the soft morning light slanted through the windows and illuminated the dust motes in golden streams. She would sit with her hands in her lap, breathing slowly, letting the warmth of the sun soothe her spirit. Sometimes she wandered to the garden at the back of the house, where the earth was cool under her fingers, and flowers nodded gently in the breeze. These small retreats became her sanctuary, a place to regain her strength, to remember her father's love, and to hold on to the kindness that defined her. Amina also turned to her creative pursuits for solace. She would hum soft songs while mending clothes, weave small patterns into baskets, or sketch figures in the dirt with a stick. Each act of creation reaffirmed her worth and reminded her that Lyra's envy could not touch the core of who she was. The contrast between the sisters became ever more pronounced. While Lyra seethed and plotted, attempting to manipulate the household and village to her advantage, Amina cultivated patience, hope, and quiet resilience, nurturing the spirit that Lyra could never diminish. Even as shadows of jealousy grew longer and darker, Amina's presence remained a quiet light within the home. Each whispered lie, each act of sabotage, was met with gentle fortitude rather than retaliation. Her spirit became a reservoir of strength, a silent testament that kindness and perseverance could withstand envy. In her quiet retreats, whether in the sunlit garden or the soft corners of her home, she gathered courage for the trials yet to come, unknowingly preparing herself for the fiery challenge that would soon alter the course of her life forever. The evening sun had dipped low behind the hills, casting long shadows across the modest home, when Lyra's jealousy reached its most dangerous peak. Amina was in the kitchen, kneeling over a wooden table, carefully stirring a pot of thick, fragrant stew that had simmered for hours. The aroma of spices and simmering vegetables filled the air, a comforting scent that usually drew admiration from the family and neighbors alike. Lyra watched from the doorway, her chest tight with rage, her fingers curling into fists. Each stirring motion of Amina's hands, each careful tilt of the pot, seemed to mock her own inability to earn praise or affection. The act was sudden, fueled by months of simmering envy. Lyra grabbed a small pot of hot, shimmering oil from the hearth and, without warning, poured it across Amina's shoulders. The first touch of the burning liquid sent searing pain through Amina's body, making her gasp and stumble back. Her screams echoed through the kitchen, filling every corner of the home with terror. Pain radiated in sharp waves across her skin, and for a moment time seemed to freeze, the only movement the cruel smirk on Lyra's face as she feigned innocence. Amina's instincts propelled her to move, to seek relief from the burning torment. She ran, wincing with every step, through the narrow hallways of the home. The floorboards creaked underfoot, and the faint light from the hearth glinted off her tears. Her father, startled by the commotion, rushed in, seeing his daughter recoiling in pain and the telltale glint of oil on her skin. His voice trembled as he called out, confused and horrified, while Lyra quickly interjected, her tone filled with feigned concern, insisting that it had been an accident, that the pot had tipped by itself. Her words were practiced, polished, meant to distract and deceive. The household reacted in a mixture of fear, anger, and disbelief. Servants and neighbors who had been visiting were horrified, unsure of what to do, while Amina, despite the agony burning through her body, tried to soothe their panic. She lowered herself to the floor, leaning against the cool walls, trying to breathe through the pain. Her mind, usually filled with stories, songs, and songs of comfort, focused on each measured breath, each tiny relief, and each shadowed corner where she could hide from the immediate chaos. As the evening wore on, the villagers began to hear whispers of what had happened. Fear spread like wildfire. Some believed that Lyra's cruelty had crossed a dangerous line, that the household was now a place where envy could manifest into lethal acts. Yet Amina bore the pain with a quiet fortitude that astonished even those who knew her gentleness. She retreated to hidden corners of the house, curling into small spaces where the shadows provided comfort and safety. There she tended to her wounds as best she could, applying cold water and cloths, murmuring to herself stories that would calm her heart and remind her of her inner strength. Though her body burned and her spirit quivered, Amina refused to allow the act of cruelty to consume her entirely. The pain was intense, the betrayal deep, but within her lay a seed of resilience, a quiet determination that whispered she would not be broken. The house, once filled with laughter and daily routines, now bore the weight of fear and tension, but in the small corners where Amina gathered herself, courage began to form. It was a courage tempered by fire, a strength that would not only heal her body but ignite a bond with a mysterious guardian yet to reveal itself. Even as the night deepened and the household lay tense and uneasy, Amina sat quietly, letting the shadows cradle her and the faint embers of the hearth warm her. Pain, betrayal, and fear surrounded her, yet a quiet flame of resolve burned within her heart. The cruelty that Lyra unleashed could wound her body, but her spirit remained untouched. ChatGPT said. As the night settled over the modest home, the air thick with the scent of singed herbs and lingering smoke from the kitchen hearth, Amina lay in a quiet corner, her body still throbbing from the burn, yet remarkably intact. Though the oil had seared her skin and set her nerves alight with pain, her wounds had begun to cool faster than they should have. The stinging sensation dulled into a strange warmth, as if the very air around her conspired to soothe her. She blinked against the flickering shadows and noticed, to her astonishment, a tiny flame hovering in the space above the spilled oil. It danced lightly, not consuming anything, but rather hovering with deliberate motion, as though it had a life of its own. Amina's heart skipped in surprise, fear mingling with awe. She stretched out a trembling hand toward the flame, expecting heat, danger, perhaps even more pain, but instead warmth radiated gently from it, like a comforting embrace. As her fingers hovered near the fire, it responded to her emotions, expanding slightly with her fear, shrinking with her hesitation, and swirling joyously when she let out a small, tentative laugh. The flame moved with intent, circling her body protectively, creating an invisible shield between her and the rest of the world. Its glow illuminated her surroundings, casting shimmering patterns on the walls and the floor, turning the drab corners of the room into a canvas of dancing light. Amina watched in amazement as the fire shifted shapes. It elongated into soft, curving lines when she curled up, curling around her like a protective serpent. It arched into wing-like forms when she rose, as if ready to carry her safely away from harm. Tiny sparks coalesced into faint figures, birds, animals, mythical creatures, that seemed to mirror her emotions, comforting her and guiding her movements. She realized that the fire was not random or chaotic. It was attentive, responsive, aware. It had chosen her, bound itself to her courage and resilience, and now moved in tandem with her spirit. Over the hours, the warmth from the fire penetrated her body, easing the sting of the burns and filling her with a strange, empowering strength. Pain remained, but it was softened by the fire's guardianship. She experimented carefully, moving her hands, stepping lightly, and watching as the flames twisted and curved to follow her motions. A sense of connection grew between them, almost as if the fire could feel her thoughts, hear her quiet whispers, and respond with gentle, glowing forms that both healed and protected. For the first time that night, Amina felt unafraid. The terror of Lyra's cruelty still lingered in her mind, but the small guardian flame whispered reassurance with every flicker and glimmer. It was alive, it was conscious, and it had chosen to shield her. She pressed her hands lightly to her burns, feeling warmth seep into her skin and a newfound energy radiate through her chest. The fire's presence ignited something within her, a deep understanding that she was not alone, that courage could manifest in forms beyond human comprehension, and that even in moments of darkness, she could command a protector born of resilience and spirit. By the time the night had fully embraced the home, Amina sat quietly, enveloped in the soft light of her magical guardian. The flame danced around her, forming shapes that comforted, healed, and shielded her, a living testament to her inner strength. In that moment she realized that her spirit, unbroken and brave, had been recognized, honored, and protected by a force that would not abandon her. The fire was no ordinary flame, it was her. Night after night, Amina sat in the quiet corner of her home, surrounded by the soft glow of her mysterious guardian flame, and began to notice patterns in its movements. The fire was no longer simply protective. It seemed to understand her emotions, responding in ways that were deliberate, almost sentient. When fear made her tremble, the flame would form towering arcs around her body, shielding her from imagined harm. When curiosity made her hands twitch, the sparks would scatter into playful shapes, like tiny firebirds dancing in the air. She realized that this small, sentient flame could communicate with her, not in words but through motion, shape, and subtle flickers of light that carried meaning as surely as spoken language. She began to experiment. Gently waving her hands through the air, she watched as the flame followed, twisting into spirals, circles, and arcs. At first, it seemed almost accidental, responding to the pressure of her will without conscious effort. But soon she learned that by focusing her thoughts and emotions, she could guide the flame's movements more precisely. The fire shaped itself into protective figures, a crouching lion that appeared to guard her side, a soaring bird that hovered above her head, and mythical shapes, dragons and serpents, that coiled in the air like living art. Each figure had a personality of its own, responding uniquely to the emotions she radiated, and she began to converse silently with them, offering gratitude and encouragement. Through these interactions, Amina's confidence grew. The flame, once a mysterious companion, became a teacher, guiding her on how to harness her inner strength and project it outward in a controlled, focused manner. She practiced creating barriers of heat and light, moving the fire in arcs to defend her personal space without letting it scorch walls, floors, or herself. She discovered that anger or fear made the flame grow erratic, while calm, measured intentions allowed it to take elegant, purposeful shapes. This understanding gave her a sense of control over her environment and over the chaos that Lyra often sought to bring into her life. The bond between Amina and the flame deepened, transforming into a silent partnership. Every courageous thought, every act of resilience, fed the fire, causing it to grow brighter and stronger. It became both shield and companion, guarding her body and nurturing her spirit. She began to feel a joy that she had not experienced since childhood, a sense of empowerment that reminded her that the cruelty of others could not define her. The flame whispered guidance in the faint, flickering language of light, helping her navigate both physical and emotional challenges with poise. In addition to protection, the flame encouraged Amina's creativity. She began sketching in the dirt with twigs, leaving small burn marks where the fire gently touched the soil. It guided her hands, creating intricate patterns and fantastical creatures that seemed almost alive. Each night, the fire grew more attuned to her desires, responding with subtle movements that communicated approval, warning, or instruction. By observing the flame, she learned patience, timing, and precision, realizing that her own strength could manifest in ways both subtle and powerful. As the nights passed, Amina's secret training became a ritual. The fire responded to her moods, mirrored her intentions, and taught her the language of bravery. She understood that this was not merely a protective force, but a reflection of her own inner spirit, a living extension of her courage and resilience. By learning to communicate with it, to guide it, and to harmonize her emotions with its movements, she prepared herself for the inevitable confrontations that awaited her. The flame had become more than a guardian, it was a partner in her journey, a silent mentor, and a testament to the fact that strength born from adversity could grow into something luminous and enduring. As the nights grew longer and the mystical flame danced faithfully around Amina, a curious pair of eyes in the neighboring house began to notice its flickering glow. Tariq, a boy of similar age, lived in the modest dwelling next door, his nights often restless and filled with the quiet hum of village life. One evening, while running an errand for his mother, he caught the silver sparks shimmering through the small window of Amina's room. At first he thought it was a reflection from the hearth or some trick of the moonlight, but night after night, he saw the same unusual glow, moving with purpose, almost as if it were alive. Tariq's curiosity became fascination. He lingered near the window, careful to remain unseen, watching the small luminous shapes flicker and twist. He noticed the way the fire responded to shadows, how it seemed to expand when a soft murmur or a whispered word escaped from within. Though he could not see Amina herself clearly, he felt her presence in the movements of the flame, the cautious pauses, the small arcs of light that mirrored tentative gestures, the gentle swirls that reflected tender care. Something extraordinary was happening, something that transcended ordinary life in the village, and Tariq felt a stirring of awe and wonder. Wanting to help without intruding, Tariq began leaving small gifts at the edge of the property near Amina's window. He left bundles of fresh herbs, carefully wrapped sketches of animals and birds, and simple meals he thought might reach her hands if she were able to collect them. He never attempted to enter the house or speak to her directly, respecting the mysterious boundary that separated them. Yet he hoped that these tiny offerings could bring comfort, just as her kindness and creativity seemed to reach beyond her walls. Inside the attic, Amina noticed the gentle changes immediately. When she found the small bundles of herbs or the neatly folded sketches, her fire responded as if sensing her emotions. The flames swelled and shimmered brighter than before, arcs of light stretching higher, curls of sparks spinning in joyful patterns. Each act of kindness from Tariq seemed to fuel the fire, strengthening its warmth, sharpening its protective instincts, and enhancing the luminous forms it created to mirror her heart. Birds and mythical shapes twirled more gracefully, dragons unfurled with confidence, and the entire space radiated an energy that filled her with hope. For the first time in many nights, Amina felt a connection beyond the walls of her confinement. She realized that the world outside held friends, that acts of kindness could reach her even when she was isolated, and that she was not alone in her struggles. The fire, her loyal guardian, seemed to understand this too. It danced higher and brighter, responding to this new wave of hope. Its shapes became more intricate, its movements more playful, as though celebrating the possibility of human connection beyond the shadows of the home. Tarek, unaware of the exact nature of the fire, felt a quiet satisfaction each time he left a gift. Though he could not yet see the girl herself, he sensed that his offerings were received, that some bond was forming between him and the mysterious presence in the attic. This silent exchange created a bridge, a thread of friendship and empathy stretching across the narrow divide of the houses, linking two hearts in quiet understanding. Through these nightly interactions, Amina's world began to expand. The fire glowed brighter, her courage strengthened, and hope blossomed. She began to dream not only of safety and survival but also of the kindness and support that might exist in the larger world, awaiting her beyond the confines of her home. The mystical flame, nourished by both her spirit and the quiet generosity of a neighbor, became a beacon of light, reminding her that even in darkness there are forces, seen and unseen, that respond to bravery, hope, and kindness. Lyra's nights, once filled with restless plotting and envy, began to take on a new edge, fear. From her room across the hall, she noticed strange flickers of light dancing behind the closed curtains of Amina's attic window. At first she thought it might be reflections from the hearth or the occasional glimmer of moonlight, but as the nights passed, the glow became undeniable. Soft, alive, moving with purpose, almost sentient in its motions. Lyra's curiosity shifted quickly into obsession. What force could illuminate her stepsister's confinement so vividly? How could Amina, locked away and seemingly helpless, produce such a spectacle? Her envy, long simmering, now twisted into a dangerous cocktail of fear and fascination. Lyra began creeping through the darkened halls at night, careful to avoid detection by their father. Each step was silent, deliberate as she approached the attic door, straining her ears for any sounds beyond the gentle flicker of light. She found herself both terrified and compelled, terrified of the unknown presence that animated the room, and compelled by a desperate desire to understand, to control, or to destroy it. Every flicker seemed alive, taunting her, asserting that there was power within Amina she could neither comprehend nor dominate. Determined to disrupt this mysterious force, Lyra tried to sabotage Amina's small spaces and belongings. She overturned baskets, scattered scraps of paper, and tipped over jars of herbs, hoping to unbalance her sister, to break her spirit, to dim whatever strange glow had begun to fill the attic. But each time she attempted an act of cruelty, the fire responded immediately and decisively. Sparks swirled into protective shapes, twisting serpents, arcing dragons, wings that shielded Amina from any impact. Every shadow she tried to manipulate was countered by a curling shimmer of flame, blocking her movements and forcing her to retreat, shaking with fear and disbelief. Lyra began to realize in the depths of her growing terror that Amina's power was not only real but expanding. The fire seemed to feed on her sister's courage, growing brighter and more intricate with each attempt to intimidate or harm her. It twisted into protective spirals, reflected in the walls and ceiling, and moved with a grace and intelligence that Lyra could not hope to match. Each failed attempt left her more anxious, more convinced that she was up against something beyond her understanding, a living force that would not be controlled by envy, malice, or deceit. Her obsession deepened. She began watching from hidden corners, trying to discern patterns, tracing the shapes the flame formed, noting the way it responded to Amina's gestures and moods. She observed how Amina's confidence, even in confinement, seemed to command the fire, and a pang of fear sharpened in her chest. What had once been jealousy had mutated into a gnawing dread. This was no ordinary girl, no ordinary light, no ordinary household misfortune. This was something alive, something protective, something that recognized bravery and resilience, and it recognized Amina. As the nights wore on, Lyra's attempts became increasingly desperate, yet increasingly futile. She could no longer dismiss the flame as a trick or illusion. It was deliberate, intelligent, and inseparable from the girl it shielded. With each thwarted intrusion, her obsession grew, and so did her fear. Lyra understood at last that Amina's power was not a momentary phenomenon, not a fragile illusion. It was an enduring force, born of courage, and nothing she could do would extinguish it. That night, the household lay quiet, with only the soft flicker of the hearth and the distant call of crickets breaking the stillness. Lyra, her mind restless with envy and growing desperation, crept once more toward Amina's attic. She had devised a new plan, This time she would destroy every trace of her stepsister's secret life. The sketches, the herbs, the small treasures that filled the corners of the attic. Each object represented the quiet resilience Amina had nurtured in secret, and Lyra was determined to eradicate it. Her footsteps were careful, silent, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation, yet she felt invincible in her own cunning. As she pushed open the attic door, a warm silver glow spilled into the dark hallway. The air seemed charged, alive with expectation, and for a fleeting moment, Lyra hesitated. But her rage propelled her forward. She grabbed a bundle of papers and herbs, ready to toss them to the floor when the flame, her steadfast companion, responded instantly. Sparks leapt into the air, twisting and curling into protective shapes. They formed walls of light, arches and swirling spirals that wrapped around the precious objects, shielding them from harm. The fire's response was mesmerizing and terrifying. It leapt and danced across the floor, reflecting light off the walls, mirrors and glass jars, creating a complex network of protective barriers. Lyra swung at a small sketch, only to find her hand blocked by a ribbon of shimmering flame that coiled and darted with almost intelligent precision. Every attempt she made to destroy, scatter, or mar Amina's belongings was foiled. Objects lifted by the wind of her own intrusion fell back gently into place, untouched. Frustration boiled within Lyra. She stomped, kicked, and lunged, but the flame anticipated her movements, curling and weaving with a fluidity that made her feel trapped, powerless. The small guardian fire became more than a shield, it was an extension of Amina herself. Each act of malice, instead of weakening her sister, only seemed to strengthen the connection between girl and flame. With every failed strike, the fire grew brighter, more intricate, its movements more elegant and controlled. From the hallway, the faint light reflected off polished surfaces and windows, catching the attention of the household. Servants, and even the father who had begun to notice subtle signs of Amina's resilience, paused to witness something extraordinary. The flame's protective energy radiated beyond the attic walls, a tangible force that spoke of a presence beyond ordinary human comprehension. Amina, watching silently from the center of the room, felt the warmth and power of the fire envelop her. She realized that this bond was unbreakable, a living testament to her inner strength and courage. Lyra, pale with frustration and fear, finally withdrew, her plans utterly thwarted. Each retreat left her more anxious, more convinced that Amina was untouchable under the fire's guardianship. The household, long used to witnessing the girl's quiet resilience, now began to notice that no harm could reach her. The flame had become both shield and symbol, a luminous barrier that protected not only her body but also her spirit. In the days that followed, Lyra's attacks became increasingly futile, each one reinforcing Amina's confidence and strengthening her bond with the fire. The attic, once a place of vulnerability, had transformed into a sanctuary of power, creativity, and safety. And as the flickering light danced over her sketches, herbs, and one quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills and the village settled into the hush of twilight, Amina's father wandered near the attic, drawn by a faint, silvery glow seeping through the cracks in the door. The light was unlike anything he had seen before, warm yet intense, flickering and shifting in ways that seemed purposeful, almost conscious. Curiosity and concern pulled him closer, and he paused at the threshold, staring in disbelief. Inside, the room shimmered with ethereal radiance. Shapes of animals, birds, and fantastical creatures danced in the silver light, hovering protectively over Amina and her treasured belongings. His eyes fell on his daughter, sitting calm and composed amidst the dancing fire. She looked up and met his gaze with a mixture of relief and courage. The flame, aware of his presence, twirled softly around her, shimmering with a gentle glow, as if introducing him to its protective embrace. Amina's father could scarcely believe what he saw. The girl he thought fragile, the one constantly overshadowed by Lyra's jealousy, radiated a quiet strength that seemed to command the very elements in the room. Amina stood and spoke with the clarity and courage of someone who had endured much. She recounted the cruelty she had suffered at Lyra's hands, from the daily belittlement to the terrible night when hot oil had burned her. Her father's heart ached as he listened, shame washing over him for having been oblivious, distracted by the affairs of daily life, and failing to notice the danger his own child had faced. He saw not only the physical evidence of her resilience but also the extraordinary manifestation of her inner strength, the fire that had never left her side, guiding and protecting her in ways he could scarcely comprehend. Tears welled in his eyes as Amina described the bond she had formed with the flame, how it had grown stronger with her courage, how it had shielded her from harm and nurtured her confidence and creativity. He marveled at the beauty and intelligence of the protective fire, seeing it as both a guardian and a reflection of Amina's indomitable spirit. The flickering light seemed almost alive, and he realized that for every night of solitude and fear, Amina had found a companion who responded to her bravery and guided her in secret. Overcome with both awe and regret, her father vowed that no harm would come to her again. He approached her cautiously, reaching out to touch her shoulder, and the fire parted gently, acknowledging his presence and allowing the gesture of reconciliation. In that moment he understood that this was no ordinary phenomenon. The mystical flame had chosen Amina, bound itself to her courage, and kept her safe when human vigilance had failed. He felt humbled and protective, a renewed sense of responsibility igniting within him. With careful words and steady resolve, he began confronting Lyra. No longer would the stepsister's envy go unchecked. Yet, he approached with caution, mindful of the extraordinary power he had witnessed. Amina's father knew that the fire was more than a tool, it was a living guardian connected to his daughter's spirit. He ensured that she would never again be left vulnerable, providing her with freedom to move, to create, and to thrive while respecting the protective presence that had kept her safe all these nights. From that evening onward, the household changed. Amina's father became an ally, a protector who recognized the extraordinary strength his daughter possessed. He treated the flame not as a threat, but as a partner in her resilience, a luminous symbol of courage that could not be ignored. Amina, finally acknowledged and understood, felt a sense of safety she had longed for, her heart swelling with hope, gratitude, and the quiet joy of being seen. As days passed, the subtle glow that had once been confined to Amina's attic began to spill beyond the windows, catching the attention of villagers going about their daily routines. At first they noticed only small flickers, a shimmer behind the curtains at dusk, a warm light that danced across the walls when the sun had fully set. Whispers spread quickly through the village. "Did you see that silver glow? Is it fire? Or spirits?" Curiosity, combined with a sense of wonder, drew small groups of neighbors toward her home, careful not to intrude but unable to resist the strange allure of the light. Word traveled faster with each passing day. Villagers who had once been skeptical now arrived to witness something extraordinary. When they peered cautiously through windows or stood respectfully outside, they saw the fire in full bloom, shapes and figures that moved with purpose, dancing across the room in intricate patterns. Lions crouched and roared silently, birds soared through arcs of light, and dragons curled in protective coils. Most striking of all was the way the fire responded to Amina herself, expanding and contracting, reflecting her gestures and emotions. It was alive, radiant, and undeniably linked to the courage and heart of the girl it shielded. The villagers marveled not only at the magical fire but at Amina herself. They had known her as kind, diligent, and gentle, but now they witnessed a strength that went beyond ordinary resilience. Even as Lyra's envy simmered in the background, the villagers saw clearly that Amina was untouchable, her spirit safeguarded by a force that could not be broken by cruelty or malice. Children gasped in wonder at the dancing flames, elders bowed their heads in respect, and young women whispered to each other about the courage and fortitude of a girl who had endured so much yet remained radiant. As more people gathered, the flames seemed to respond to the presence of onlookers, shimmering brighter and forming shapes that suggested protection, guidance, and hope. Each figure told a story, of endurance, of bravery, of a young girl who had faced danger and emerged stronger. The villagers began to understand that this was not merely a spectacle, but a reflection of Amina's spirit, a living, luminous testament to her inner strength. The fire radiated warmth and light that went beyond its mystical glow, inspiring awe, admiration, and a newfound reverence for the girl they had long overlooked. Parents brought their children closer, sharing the story of Amina's resilience and the magical fire that had nurtured and protected her. They spoke of courage in the face of cruelty, of hope preserved in adversity, and of the extraordinary power that kindness and inner strength could summon. Even those who had doubted the strange occurrences could not deny the truth before their eyes. Amina was shielded, guided, and celebrated by a force that seemed born from her own heart, and the village collectively felt the impact of her bravery. The mystical flame became a symbol within the community, a living legend of courage and resilience. Its luminous presence reminded everyone that strength could arise in the quietest, most unassuming places, that protection and guidance could take forms both visible and magical, and that the heart's courage could command forces beyond comprehension. Amina, standing amid her glowing companions, felt the pride and admiration of the village, yet remained humble, knowing that the flame was a partner, a guide, and a reflection of her own unwavering spirit. With each flicker, the villagers' admiration deepened, and the story of Amina and her magical flame spread beyond the neighborhood, inspiring others to believe in courage, resilience, and the extraordinary power of the human spirit when paired with hope and determination. As the days unfolded, Amina's life transformed in ways that reached far beyond the walls of her home. The mystical fire, once a secret companion, now stood as a visible emblem of her courage, illuminating her path and amplifying the qualities that had always made her extraordinary: kindness, creativity, and unwavering spirit. With every flicker and curl of flame, she felt herself growing stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the subtle rhythms of courage and resilience that the fire mirrored back to her. No longer confined by fear or by Lyra's jealousy, Amina began to move freely through the village, carrying with her the lessons she had learned during her nights of isolation. She shared her experiences with other children, teaching them that courage is not the absence of fear but the persistence to act rightly despite it. She showed them how creativity could illuminate even the darkest corners, how patience and determination could transform despair into beauty, and how the quiet strength within could command forces, seen or unseen, that protect and guide those who embrace it. Villagers watched as Amina demonstrated the fire's wonders, not for spectacle or admiration, but to teach the principles it had silently instilled in her. The flames danced in response to her gestures, casting shapes that illustrated lessons of hope, justice, and perseverance. Birds, dragons, and protective spirits formed in the fire as she explained the importance of resilience, helping children and adults alike understand that bravery often manifests in quiet, enduring ways. Her teachings were not just about magic or mysticism. They were about the human spirit, the power of empathy, and the transformative effect of goodness in the face of cruelty. Meanwhile, Lyra's influence waned rapidly. The villagers, who had once feared her sharp tongue and envy, began to see the stark contrast between her cruelty and Amina's compassion. No malice, no act of sabotage could dim the light of a girl protected by both courage and the mystical flame. Lyra's schemes, once potent, seemed trivial in the glow of Amina's resilience. People began to distance themselves from her bitterness, quietly recognizing that envy could never triumph over virtue and inner strength. Amina's empowerment did not stop at inspiring others. It reshaped the very culture of the village. Community members began leaving offerings of gratitude near her home, small sketches, herbs, and notes acknowledging the lessons they had learned from her courage. The mystical fire, once confined to the attic, became a symbol of hope for all who witnessed its protective glow. It reminded everyone that even in the harshest circumstances, the light within a virtuous and determined heart cannot be extinguished. In time, Amina's name became synonymous with bravery and wisdom. Parents told their children of the girl who endured cruelty yet emerged radiant, guided by a fire that reflected her inner strength. Villagers learned to cherish creativity, kindness, and resilience as treasures more valuable than fear or envy. Amina herself remained humble, understanding that the fire was not just a protector but a teacher, a mirror of the courage she had cultivated through hardship. Through her example, the village came to understand a profound truth: cruelty, no matter how intense, cannot overcome a spirit fortified by courage, guided by wisdom, and illuminated by the fire of virtue. Amina's light became a beacon, not just of magical wonder, but of the enduring power of hope, compassion, and inner strength. Years passed, and the story of Amina and her mystical fire became woven into the fabric of village life, passed from one generation to the next like a sacred parable. Travelers who happened upon the village would hear whispers of the girl who had been tormented by her cruel stepsister yet emerged unscathed, protected by a flame that responded to her courage and heart. Children would listen wide-eyed as elders recounted how Amina's resilience had transformed the ordinary into the extraordinary, turning fear and suffering into a source of wonder and hope. Artists, inspired by the tale, began leaving small offerings at the threshold of Amina's old home. Silver dust scattered carefully across the steps, delicate sketches pinned to the walls, and handmade tokens of admiration were all left in honor of the magical guardian flame that had shielded her. They saw in the story more than just the magic of fire. It symbolized the enduring power of creativity, the ability to transform adversity into beauty, and the eternal protection that courage can summon. Each gift, each gesture, was a tribute to Amina's bravery, a way of connecting with the same mystical energy that had guided her in solitude. On clear nights, when the full moon rose high above the village, whispers of wonder filled the air. Villagers claimed that faint glows appeared around her old home, shimmering softly through the windows and casting gentle silver reflections on the walls. Sometimes shapes could be seen moving in the luminous haze, figures of animals, spirals of protective light, and the faint outlines of fantastical creatures that mirrored the lessons Amina had once taught. Children would press their faces to the windows, imagining themselves guided by the same flame, feeling a warmth that was both comforting and inspiring. Even adults, hardened by the ordinary struggles of life, would pause to watch the faint radiance, feeling a spark of courage awaken within them. The legend of Amina and her guardian flame grew with each telling. Storytellers described how she had endured Lyra's envy and cruelty, how the fire had shielded her from harm, and how it had responded to her courage, reflecting the resilience of a virtuous heart. They spoke of the lessons the flame imparted, that creativity and hope could flourish even in the darkest moments, that suffering could be transformed into strength, and that protection often comes from within, nurtured by bravery and guided by compassion. Travelers and villagers alike came to understand that Amina's power had not been merely magical but deeply human, a manifestation of her unwavering spirit, her kindness, and her determination to rise above cruelty. Artists continued to honor her memory in quiet, meaningful ways, drawing inspiration from the shapes of the flame, the protective figures it created, and the story of a girl who had turned torment into triumph. They would leave sketches of birds, dragons, and spirals of light in their studios, whispering a silent acknowledgement of Amina's enduring influence. Each full moon, the air around her old home seemed to shimmer with the presence of that ancient, protective fire, a reminder that the strength of one heart could ripple outward, touching all who witnessed it. Over time, the story of the guardian flame became more than a tale of magic. It became a symbol of courage, hope, and the transformative power of resilience. Parents told their children of Amina's unwavering spirit, teaching them that even in the face of cruelty, a heart guided by virtue and strengthened by creativity could summon forces beyond comprehension, whether magical or metaphorical. Villagers learned to cherish acts of bravery, kindness, and ingenuity, inspired by the luminous presence that continued to haunt the old home, guiding the imagination and courage of those who dared to dream. Generations later, the legacy of the guardian flame endured. The glow that once protected Amina remained a symbol of hope, courage, and inspiration. Even in her absence, the mystical fire, born from the bravery of one young girl, reminded all who witnessed it that no act of cruelty could ever extinguish the light of a courageous heart. Amina's story, her bond with the magical flame, and the lessons it imparted became timeless, etched forever in the hearts and minds of the village, and beyond.